Okay.
What?
Ladies and gentlemen, and variations thereof, welcome to the Selectives Lorecast, a casual Elder Scrolls podcast. Today we are talking about Vivec. It's all Vivec all the time. And with me today are...
I am Chris Franzen, also known as Mojo.
I am Cody Higgy, also known as Orda Corvus.
I am Pilaf the Defiler, also known as the Legate Cyclonophus, and I have a tomato, a killer tomato.
My name is Luther Weiser. I am also known as Darcis or Siddhartha.
Flippers.
Australia.
You're also an Australian dude.
Sorry, there's like two people before me on the thing. Hi, my name is Nathan, and my username is Mr. Flippers.
My name's not Putnam, but it's my username. So that's about it.
Hey, I'm Tabitha. I am known as Slowed, or alternatively not that Slowed.
As in not the one who's been banned from everywhere, or the one who has been banned from everywhere?
I'm not the one who's been banned from everywhere.
All right. Okay. So, and of course I forgot to mention my name is Chris Nelson, but everybody here knows me as Rotten Deadite. We've been getting a lot. There's been a lot of attention sent towards Vivec's direction in the past half a year, I think. Mm-hmm. And the problem is that unless you played Morrowind and unless you paid very close attention to Morrowind, it may not be entirely obvious why Vivec is worth all this kind of attention. And that's what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about what Vivec is and who Vivec is and what role he plays in Morrowind and the other games and what role he may or may not be playing in the future. So let me scroll back up to where our what order we were going to do things in here. Dead Air. Okay, so Origins. Yes, this is a good one. Okay, so one of the more controversial aspects of Vivec is that well, okay, who is he? All right. Well, who is Z? We're going to use the right word here. Vivec is a member of the tribunal, one of the three mortals become gods in Morrowind, and one of the three who rule over Vardenfell and the Dunmer, the Dark Elves, or at least did until the ending of Morrowind. And I'm not going to spoil it any further than that because a lot of you people still haven't played that game.
For shame.
Yeah, and shame on you. And the other two members of the tribunal being Almalexia and Sothasil. And like in most things in Morrowind, these three are representing the same three organization, the same three classifications of the mage, the warrior, and the thief. But we'll get into that in a minute. Vivec is commonly called sometimes by himself as the most public face of ALMSIVI, of the tribunal. He's the one who walks through the Dunmer public. Vivec's the one who's seen most frequently by the Dunmer people, and Vivec is also the only member of the tribunal that you can see in Morrowind unless you buy the tribunal expansion. But as important as Vivec is, as probably the most public face of the leadership of the Dunmer, it's not entirely obvious who he is or where he came from. And the only source that you have in Morrowind, to the best of my knowledge, is the 36 Lessons of Vivec. And if you read those, the first thing that will pop to mind is probably, what in the hell am I reading? And the second thing is, by the time you're done reading, you'll really seriously wonder whether this is a work of fiction or not. And, you know, and to be honest with you, I don't know if anybody here can actually accurately, can do justice to whether or not the 36 Lessons of Vivec is fiction or not. In the span of a half an hour, you know. We could probably spend an hour debating just that. It's and that it's complicated partially because Vivec appears to have, when Vivec and the rest of the tribunal became gods, it's sort of implied that Vivec wrote the 36 Lessons of Vivec and rewrote their entire prehistory up to that point and became the author of his own divinity, which is a complicated concept and very metaphysical, and without question the act of a god. So Vivec and the Tribunal are also, I would like to mention, for those of you who played Skyrim and not Morrowind, you might find a little bit of an interesting parallel between these characters because they are like Talos in the respect that they used to be mortals and are now gods. But for extra bonus credit, you can tell me why Talos doesn't count and the Tribunal do. So, don't give it away. They're competing below in the comments below this video for bonus credit, which is nothing at all. So, so in the 36 Lessons of Vivec, the prehistory that you get is that Vivec was born from was born in an egg form, conceived by the combined magical influences of Almalexia and Sothasil in the body of a Dunmer commoner, and evolved like a Pokemon from her egg form to eventually a humanoid form in, I want to say, Sermon 8. And yes, the Netraman's wife, but I'm trying not to, again, not the full bucket of crazy. So,
or if you want to say the easier way.
Is it? I don't know, it might be. But then I have to explain what a Netraman is. So, yeah, all right, whatever.
The guy who hunts netches around?
Yeah, everybody knows netches. If you play Morrowind, it's the big floating jellyfish.
I thought it was kind of like a shepherd, but for netches.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically, it's like a rancher. It's basically Vivec's mother was the wife of a cowboy.
Basically saying
sounds sexier than it is actually,
that
but
explains so much.
Yeah,
really. Origins is the point of
yeah,
getting out here.
And because you're not given a different story in the 36 Lessons, it's easy to just sort of assume that this is actually the case, that this is how Vivec was born. But when you find out, if you read it all closely, you'll eventually figure out, even within the span of Morrowind, that Vivec was not born a god. And that raises the question, well, who was Vivec before Z was a god? And the answer appears to have been given to us by Michael Kirkbride in a document called What My Beloved Taught Me, which is that Vivec was the offspring of a Netraman and his wife, and eventually became a hoodlum, possibly some kind of amalgam of a prostitute or drug dealer or gang member or something.
He was a street urchin.
In Mournhold, I believe, right? It was Mournhold, right?
Yeah, he was in the Mourning Hold.
What we assume is Mournhold.
Yeah, it was somewhere around Mournhold, I believe, but not like inner Mournhold, because, you know, that's where important people live. It was sort of like on the outer end of it.
Yeah, I buy that. Yeah, that makes sense. And, yeah. And this is all part of the sort of dichotomy of Vivec's relationship with Nerevar as, was he a teacher, or was he Nerevar's friend, or was he even just some dude? I mean, it's actually kind of left wide open for you to decide for yourself. But I would kind of like to hear from everybody about what... actually, I would really like to hear from everybody about what they think Vivec's role was in the tribunal before they became gods.
Who wants to go? Yeah.
I'll start talking. I think it's pretty important to note the sort of importance, story-wise, of Vivec writing himself into the role that they did, because often, I mean, if you look at real-world stories, you look at all of these sort of, almost Jesus-like figures, and they all are born, of virgin mothers. like virgin, not necessarily in the like sexual virgin sense, but virgin in the not reliant on a man sense. And Vivec wrote their father out of being in the 36 lessons, which is super important because that implies all of this
psychology.
Like maybe there was abuse happening there too and stuff like that, which is
or at least some level of intolerance. It's also important to mention that the Immaculate Conception concept is important for a number of reasons. Basically, the one that I like the most is that it means that the character or being has been born without the sin of desire.
Yeah, definitely, exactly.
And everybody remembers the whole, desire without lust for like work without lust for result thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's exactly it. This is the divine creation of between a man and a woman done without any form of desire, which is about as divine as you can possibly get.
Right.
One of the cool things I saw today, and I actually never thought about it this way, was our good buddy Thox put this on Reddit. In Sermon 1, let's see, Ayem came first to the village of the Nechaman, and her shadow was that, yada yada yada. I totally lost my spot. But basically, it almost puts the egg, so to speak, of Vec into the Nechaman's wife. And then Set in the ocean, the homunculi
sends forth a horde of homunculi, yes.
Yeah, and
Set inseminates the egg.
Yeah, and so he writes out his from the previous reality, depending on how you like to think the sermons go, if they overwrite anything. But the prime reality, so to speak, Vec writes out his parents and makes Almalexia and Sothasil his parents.
Well, he doesn't write out his mother. His mother is still very important for
his mother just becomes the vessel in which he is
shell.
Yeah.
Which I think he will regret. I think at some point down the line he'll regret writing his mother out as just a shell, just a receptacle for his divine being.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's go ahead, Flippers. Jeff. Okay. I thought you had something to say.
Yeah, I do, but if you want to keep going.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought. Jesus. My stomach
again.
No, yeah, I thought. Considering he sort of did write himself to be sort of like the child between Almalexia and Sothasil, because he's always meant to be this sort of in-between point of Almalexia and Sothasil, because they both show such. You don't think so?
I'm nodding. I agree 100%. He's Vivec is the bridging point between the opposite, the chiral entities.
Yeah, he's when you get the two together. And I feel like he wants to do that, and he wants to write that way because, the 36 lessons is such a big thing to everyone in Morrowind, and it's sort of trying to solidify his legitimacy as one of the God Kings of Morrowind. But in doing that, he still does care for his mother, and so he shows that he does care for her in the story by, as she's about to die, I think, he says, the fire is mine, let it consume me, and all that stuff, to show that he does still care for her as she is his mother, but he's given up that familial role with her so that he can be more closely linked to the two larger mythic figures, which are going to wind up being more important to him than his mother really is, and to everyone in Morrowind, because who's the Nechaman's wife compared to Almalexia or Sothasil,
Yeah.
And he has to juggle this, whether he wants to show how much he cares for his mother and how he's related to her, or how much he is, a mythic figure linked to two other gods that the people of Morrowind love.
Yep, that's an excellent point. It's really, and also it's worth mentioning that Almalexia and Sothasil were the leaders of House Indoril before they became gods.
Yeah.
So Yeah, so that makes it. You're right. It makes it even more critical that Vivec is able to explain himself as being a bridging point because, I mean, how else are you going to make yourself important? And it's interesting to me that Vivec's sort of metaphysical responsibility there as the self-described mastery between mystery and mercy. He's mastery because he has to be, because you can't be the bridging point between two opposites without being a master of both. But at the same time, and it's something else that I try to emphasize in the commentaries that I'm writing, is that the 36 lessons, like when Vivec is the master of both mercy and mystery, it doesn't mean that mercy and mystery are lessened in any way. It just you kind of have to imagine this sort of like contradictory nature of two opposites, and then the third thing that enters into that, without lessening the other two.
One of the parts of mastery being juggling that.
Yeah. And so I think that a lot of people can spend a lot of time. I think that let's not beat around the bush. I think I can spend a lot of time talking about what Vivec's life was like before becoming a god, and I'm going to try and keep it short. But let me ask this question, so I'm not the only guy rattling on here. From what my beloved taught me, what do you think you guys can assume is true about Vivec's life as a mortal?
Well, I always sort of...
Wait, hold on a second. Let's get Josh has something. Go, Josh.
Oh, okay.
I got an altogether more mundane observation to make about Vivec that gets overlooked a lot. He's the youngest of the tribunal. Like, no matter which version of the story you read, he's either just a baby, and Almalexia and Sulfasil are adults, or he's from like he's like from a subsequent generation. So I always feel like he's personified as having more to prove, which is why he's like the most gallant knight of the first council. He's always putting himself out there because he's kind of got the younger brother syndrome a little bit. And Vivec as a mortal, if we imagine that he was not born, had the little man syndrome maybe a little bit, which might be why he put himself out there so much.
That makes sense, him having to compensate for that. I mean, I could see him being, in this time kind of vulnerable to that kind of self-doubt, where he overcompensates to, get on, their level, so to speak. Yeah,
it's a conversation they had.
Yeah.
Jesus, get on my level.
Get on my level.
I'm a little bit self-conscious about this because it just occurred to me that I'm being really bad about using gender-neutral pronouns when we're talking about Vivec,
Just noticed that.
I'm really bad at it, and I apologize if I'm offending anybody. I'm working at it.
Throughout this entire thing, I'm probably going to refer to Vivec as he. I don't intend for that to be an insult to anyone. It's just when I talk, it's going to be straight off the bat and as quickly as I can get it out, really. And Z here is Z over there. So no offense. It's just that he and she come to my mind a whole lot quicker than anything else does.
Continuity purposes, it would be better if we would all just agree on a pronoun.
Otherwise, I'm just going to end up skipping over my own, tripping over my own words even worse than I do already. Yeah. Cody, you've got something?
Yeah, kind of building off what Pilaf said and what was mentioned before, the potential for there being a history of abuse there in here past. And we know, I know we were going to get into sexuality later on, but I do think it's important at this point to mention Vivec's intersex nature, and as someone born into a hyper-conservative society, which the Dunmer most definitely are.
Arguments could be made both ways, actually, which I kind of don't like doing.
They've got this weird radical... Oh, sorry, I'll let you go, man.
Yeah, let them...
Yeah.
I think there's definitely a potential that maybe, kind of building off what Pilaf said, Z came from a background where there was a constant need to fit in, especially as someone growing up in that society with that kind of an identity. That I think that the struggle there and the abuse and the need to shine potentially in spite of all that is worth considering.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point. I forgot to mention we like it hasn't stated outright, but I think it's a pretty safe bet to say that Vivec is the only intersex being in the entire history of the Elder Scrolls.
At least
We've
you
never
know
heard
that
of
we know.
another one.
At least named, yeah.
Well, you would think that someone would have mentioned it. You know, I mean,
yeah.
well, the only
I would
okay,
agree
true,
with
the
that.
only intersex mortal. That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that like if he weren't the only one, it might just like him being born like that might just serve to exacerbate just
Yeah.
his rise to divinity.
There's certainly a big deal made out about it, at least.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But the question is it like, because Vivec is a god and intersexed, then it's easy to understand how the culture in Morrowind might say, well, being intersexed means that you're closer to being divine. But before Vivec was divine, was that the case? And we don't know, but I would speculate that it wasn't.
Yeah.
Given the history of being a street urchin, prostitute, thief, beggar, I think we can safely assume that Beck had a difficult time in her teenage years, younger years growing up, etc., etc.
Yeah, it's a pretty safe bet.
Yeah.
So what do we think of? What do we think Vivec's job was as a mortal in the tribunal before becoming mastery?
Strategic advisor.
Yeah, I think just an advisor.
As a thief, as an obviously brilliant person, an accomplished liar, poet, all the things we know about Vivec, it fits my mind that he would have been, if you had Sotha Sil as the sort of Nerevar's royal vizier, so to speak, mystery, magic, all that good stuff, and we obviously have ALMSIVI in a warlike aspect, being the warrior queen and whatnot. I think that to balance those two, between those two, you have an advisor. You have someone in a strategic capacity who's clever and conniving and all those things that Vivec is.
Oh, Vivec also mentions in what my beloved taught me. He mentions that that he has the third eye, some kind of a psychic ability, which isn't really adequately explained, but yeah.
Yeah, it probably doesn't even have to be, but
Probably not.
I definitely think Vivec is like an advisor role because his relationship with Nerevar is so strong that even though he might have made this up in the 36 lessons, but there's even a point where Nerevar goes to his wife, of all people, and says, where is my teacher, because I miss him. Yeah. And I think a part of being an advisor isn't necessarily... Yeah, I think it's because Nerevar was such a high, prestigious leader, he had to not only, think, he needed someone who wasn't just smart in the sense of Sotha Sil, who was very intelligent, but he needed someone as well who could understand what the common people would live through, or what even people who lived in shit, felt like, and how they thought about things, and someone who could think on their feet and understand how common people live and not nobles of great houses.
Right.
Right. Because, especially, a lot of this can just be blamed by, them basically going batshit by losing their divinity. But we see in Tribunal that ALMSIVI and Sotha Sil both just completely are just removed. And, I know that they became more removed as the years went, but if they were both the leaders of House Indoril, then they were probably already like that to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree.
I got a little bit of insight, I think, I got a comparison to make with Vivec. I'm going to compare him to a historical figure.
Ooh.
He was a counselor and an advisor. Are any of you familiar with Romance of the Three Kingdoms in any capacity?
Oh yeah.
Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
There's a figure in the Kingdom of Wei called Sirmayir. That's the closest I can get to Chinese pronunciation. Sorry. And yeah, well, they call him that. And yeah, well, anyway, that's how it's spelled. He's Cao Cao's advisor, and he enters into the story as Cao Cao's giving a big speech. He lost this big naval battle, and you know, he's the ruler of his kingdom. He's supposed to be this ultimate badass everyone looks up to. And halfway through, he hears this guy loudly snoring. And he's like, how dare you sleep during my speech? I'm the mighty Cao Cao. And the guy's like, oh, I'm sorry. It's just you're boring me to death. You have no personality. I see that guy as Vivec. You know? Like I can see like one of his possible origin stories is Nerevar's like, okay, we lost this battle against the Nords, but next time, he's just like, I'm sorry, bore me to death. You have no personality, and like he's so impressed by the sheer intestinal fortitude of this person that takes him in as an advisor. So that's a little bit of headcanon I got there. And that might not necessarily represent, you know, the truth, but I can see that characterization as being something he possesses. He's very witty, very sarcastic, sardonic, you know. They're all having these big meetings, you know, and they're like, oh, you know, we really got to move some troops through, you know, this or that place. And then you just look off in the corner, and he's the guy that's just, like, fiddling around with something, like, halfway paying attention.
Doing sermon.
Doing yoga or something, yeah.
What was that picture that I saw of, like, Vivec with his head removed? And he was carrying back, like, a thing of pomegranates.
Like the guys from the Labyrinth, like playing on his own head.
And Almalexia just looks so angry at him.
She's so pissed,
There's that knowing look between him and Almalexia, and Nerevar is just like, hey man, pomegranates, awesome.
Nerevar's down. He's totally down. He's like, hey, pomegranates. Yeah. That's the...
I don't take anything seriously, really.
Yeah. Well, there's actually something... Oh, go ahead, Chris. I don't really have much. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I might be in a minority on this. Something that it's always been kind of a thing in my mind that prior to Vivec's apotheosis, I like to think that he is nothing more than a... Nerevar's having an affair with him, basically. He was never really a big advisor, or he was, but only as a cover, so Nerevar could go, take him into the broom closet and have a go, at a moment's whim.
Franson's been reading the Sixth House document.
I don't know. But I like to think that he fucked his way into divinity, basically, because he mentions that he, and what my beloved taught me, for you, I would learn to read and write, so that implies that he's illiterate. He doesn't have a lot of skills outside of, alleged prostitution or, street hooliganry. Which, I mean, I'm sure can come in handy, having those kinds of, whatever kind of skooma dealing, whatever.
Run-ins with Cyrus.
Yeah.
Not at that point. Not at that point. But yeah, I like to think that he basically, worked his way in, and post-apotheosis, made himself a little bit more significant, and going off of what we were saying before about him compensating, having the younger brother syndrome. He literally came from the very bottom, and wrote himself into being at the very top, almost to where I see a lot where a lot of people say Vivec's a Mary Sue, which I mean. Nerevar's a Mary Sue.
Yeah,
Talos.
Exactly.
Tiber Septim is the Mary Sue.
I had a little addendum to what Chris is saying. I kind of think it could be somewhere in the middle. He starts off with no skills, and he's like on the surface, he's very flippant and everything, but I think he's also the guy that, like, up until like 2 or 3 in the morning every morning, like after everyone goes to bed, he's the guy that like sneaks up and he's like trying to teach himself to read and stuff, like really trying to improve himself, but he never really can catch up because Sophie's still.
I agree 100% with that, actually. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
We can really hit the ground running with the whole, maybe he was Nerevar's lover idea, because, I mean, you can look at, like, the historical role of, prostitutes and men in power. A lot of times those prostitutes become, the man's advisors, or, like, their confidants and things like that. So I think that we can go with that. Yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah. That's the concubine. As you hear about them in most histories, and it does kind of make you wonder why was Nerevar even talking to him in the first place in What My Beloved Taught Me? It looked like he was filling out a poll, but to what purpose?
Yeah, I think wasn't it just he was hanging out with a trade merchant or something, and under his merchant captain they went to stop, I think, and
that's in the lesson.
Nerevar just walked over and he's like, "Hey man, what's going on?"
Well, actually, in the lessons, Vivec is like stalled out on the side of the road, waiting specifically for Nerevar.
Here's how I read What My Beloved Taught Me. If I can just say real quick something, it almost seems like Vivec was hanging out with a little gang of hoodlums, like throwing rocks at walls, and this big in-drill cavern comes by, and something about him like gets Nerevar's attention. Like he looks over and sees the kid, and like he just sees something in him. So he
holy crap! That little kid over there is hot.
Well, like this guy's got potential, or this kid has potential, maybe a little bit of both. That's how I read it.
It's hard to say, and unfortunately the author isn't here with us. So, and I'll make sure and guilt trip him about this to no end. There's a lot of Morwind's basic sort of philosophy that it endorses is one of personal authority and of just personal interpretation, and the nature of reality as the way you choose to interpret the same lie everyone else is given. But so there's a lot of very good reasons to not have these things specifically written about Vivec, because part of the whole point is that we don't know them.
Right.
And we're not intended to know them, and we're never going to. And frankly, to be honest with you, some of the best fan fiction I've read is about, the tribunal as mortals. So I'm kind of happy with that. Otherwise, that fan fiction wouldn't exist. Also, some of the better slash fiction you're going to catch. So that's true. So let's you know what? Let's just dive right into the fun subject. I just want to talk about Vivec's Wang for a little while.
Muatra!
Sometimes Wang.
And I just kind of want to point out that this is something I've observed in a lot of fan communities, especially in comic books, where it seems like you can't talk to a comic book nerd for like 15 minutes without them eventually starting to talk about Superman's dick. And
actually, I posted on Tumblr not long ago saying questions about Vivec in anticipation of this, and one of the first questions was, does he have a giant dick?
Yeah. That's a great guess.
Stan Lee.
It's
when he, I guess.
Yeah. So, again, if you haven't played Morrowind, cut it out. But if you play Morrowind and you read the 36 Lessons of Vivec, you're going to read from Sermon 14 forward a lot about Vivec's spear, which is called Muatra, and it's sort of referred in it's implied in no uncertain terms that Muatra is at the very least a symbol, and at the very most definitely Vivec's penis. And a lot of people have sort of I've talked to a lot of people who were really confused by this, about why Vivec is going around stabbing things with his penis. And
who doesn't?
God.
Well, yeah. First off, given the opportunity, would no one else? Well, actually, yeah, I'm gonna deal with Milk Taker in just a second, because that's like what we're forgetting. What I'm forgetting to mention here is that Muatra is more than it's Vivec's penis and his vagina. It's his entire sexual organ. Or organs. I don't know what the right. I don't know. But
I don't know that we really
the reason why it's important for Vivec to have a weapon or an item or to utilize his sex in this nature is because it sort of is a reference to the to Hindu mythology. In the Hindu god Shiva, who has a symbol called the linga, which is stated outright to be, in poorly translated documents, as Shiva's penis. But in fact, if you read into this at all with any great depth, you'll discover that what's actually happening here is that the linga is what they call a reference or a symbol of Shiva's penis. It's not literally Shiva's penis, which is important because there are cultures that exist where if you build a statue of a god, then that is literally the god. There's that you have constructed a statue of whatever demon you're worshiping, and then that is actually the demon.
Iconoclast.
And so, oh, good lord. Okay. Sorry, I just read the chat. Stop doing that. Okay. All right. So, that doesn't show up in these things, does it? All right. Okay. So, in this, and the reason why it's important to consider the linga as a marker is that it is referencing not Shiva's sexual organ, but Shiva's generative power, sort of the God, what's a good way to put it? Well, in Vivec's case, I can very easily sum it up. It's Muatra represents Vivec's power to affect change, which is
what genitals
in
are
the
at their basic form.
I'm sorry?
It's what genitals are at their basic form.
Well, it's an element of creation, exactly, and it's a much more metaphysical and complicated concept than Vivec walking around slapping people with his wang, which is entirely too humorous to be true.
Hey, Sermon 14.
What?
Sermon 14. He literally does that.
Yeah, he actually. Well, but you see, that's the thing, is that you can read Sermon 14 and it says that he uses Muatra to kill the children that are running around, or I think it's actually so technically I think it's Sermon 16 that happens in.
No, it's Sermon 14 where there are demons. Yeah, there are demons in Sermon 14.
It is 14.
Who observed it, and what?
Yeah,
and what
and
they
he spends the rest of his. Go ahead.
What they do is they basically observed Vivec and Moligbal doing it, and from that, I think they did was it spear biting, I think, and the earth was wet from it and some shit like that.
Yeah.
And after the event, Vivec just goes nuts and just starts going through everyone. And I think the quote itself is something like, anyone who touched Muatra was turned to bones, or something like that. And the wise still hide from Muatra.
Yeah, and but it's important that what's being said there is that it's Muatra that does this. It's Vivec's spear. It's the marker icon of his sexual productivity. It's not. So in fact, if you read the 36 lessons, if you kind of look past the whole "this is Muatra, guess what it represents" thing, it's really just Vivec's spear. It's literally a weapon that he's killing things with. But it's important that you don't just limit yourself to that interpretation, because it is very relevant to Vivec's character that that he's going around killing things with the powerful essence of his being. Because especially when you start reading the 36 lessons and start analyzing the way what Vivec's children are and the way he dispatches them, it becomes very important that you understand that he's absorbing or changing fallen aspects of himself.
Yeah.
And so when he
I think that's a bit of a problem in Tez law, is that a lot of people want to, because of how usually, this goes in a lot of other franchises and stuff, is that we want to get one theory, and then we just want to run with that and just stay with that, whereas in Tez you can't just have one view on one thing. It can be many things at the same time. We have to
at the same time is really important. Yeah, it has to be. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's you have to keep all these contradictory and disparate ideas in your head at the same time, and that's where you get the truth from. It's not just one easy story. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think we could do a whole podcast about objectivism. When
I'm building up to it, believe it or not. I've got a document that's entirely about stuff I want to talk about before we hit that junk, and then after we hit that thing, we head immediately into me explaining Coda, which is going to be
there's a good quote
like a two-parter.
6 hours.
There's a good quote about truth and Star Trek. Actually, there's an episode where Worf is talking to these young Klingons who've never Klingon creation myth before.
Okay, I really like that. I'm going to write that down.
Yeah, and that's great stuff of the Klingon Empire did, and this one kid's like, "Is any of this actually true?" And he's like, "Well, I discover new truths every time I read the stories."
Yeah. Oh, that's a great way to put it. That's a fantastic way to put it.
It doesn't have to be literally truth, but there can be truth in it. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's Vivec himself, I think, it mentions a couple of times that it's really important for every lie to teach something, because otherwise you're just jerking off. It's that there's got to be a purpose to every one of his untruths, or then what the hell's even the point of getting out of bed in the morning? Let's see.
Well, I'm actually not even out of bed to begin with.
Oh.
Yeah. Hey, we had to tell him to put a shirt on, so.
He actually did.
Let's see. We've hit on pretty much all the big things that I was personally looking to hit on, without getting too terribly ultra nerd about it.
I'm proud of us.
Yeah. Like I like to tell people, what I do in the Elder Scrolls community is a little bit like what Star Trek nerds do when they talk about how warp drives work. We're pretty much at that same level of nerd at this point.
We could just go into something a bit obvious. Probably the first thing you're going to notice about Vivec is, say, his skin, how it's kind of.
Thank you. Yeah.
Duality.
It's two colors. Everybody remembers, right? All you people at home remember that the Dunmer were cursed in some way, by whom, depends on who you ask, where they used to look pretty much like the Altmer, and then something happened, and then their skin turned this dark, bluish, blackish color, and their eyes turned red. And Vivec is half and half. He's one half Chimmer and one half Dunmer. And
too. On one half he's got the old Ashlander type armor, and on the other half he's got the Great House Indoril.
That's right, the Indoril armor. That's right, he does. Yeah. That I had not actually seen. That's a little frightening that I did not know that, actually.
Yeah, I actually didn't realize that until now.
What the hell am I even doing? What the hell's...
Actually, hosting this podcast.
Yeah, if we want to talk about that, what do you guys think? Is Vivec ambidextrous, or is he right or left-handed?
Definitely ambidextrous.
Yeah, he's got to be.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
But why is
thinking
Vivec...
about why would the Chimer side be the right hand, or why would the Dunmer side be the left? And
I've always wondered about that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because one side of the armor is a lot bigger than the other. So I figured into it.
One is the armor.
And also, in my right hand is how I crushed the world in my right hand, but in my left hand is how it could have won against me.
Oh, right.
So if his left side is Dunmer, then is Dunmer the victory against all odds?
Well, it kind of does that in Coda, but
and in Sermon 36 it does it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a reason why Vivec is half Dunmer and half Chimmer?
I think he did that on purpose.
I feel like he lives in both worlds. You know?
Yeah, I think it's more of it's more the merging point again, because even though they didn't put it in the game, Sothersil is written to be Dunmer. Whereas
Are you sure about that?
as we know,
I really want a citation on that, because that's a big deal, and I really want to find somebody to tell me where that's from.
You'll find the opinion is split on that in the community. I'm with him. I see him as a Dunmer. I see the Dunmer skin tone on Sothersil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In all honesty, I can't think of a Dunmeri text to go off of at the moment. I do know that, as unreliable as it is, 2920, the last year of the First Era, talks about him being a Dunmer, which, again, is not a great source, but it's a source. So,
it's better than nothing, yeah.
It shows that there's an idea that he's Dunmer.
I should point out that 2920 also says that Vivec is a Dunmer in a fine red robe with long hair, so...
I didn't look that up. I didn't know
was.
Wow. I'm gonna look that up.
Hey, some people are confused about the fire.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, maybe they just kind of, he had a bad hair day, and the fire was all,
God knows I've wanted to do it.
Yeah. That's, Okay.
What does the fire hair represent?
I think it's in the sermon, but I couldn't tell you the exact passage.
It's one of my favorite, pretty much literal statements in the lessons that Nerevar, I'm pretty sure, misinterpreted. Vivec was getting his head shaved, and Nerevar asked what that was for, and Vivec said, to make room for the fire.
Well, I mean, it's not
maybe it's like
it could be partially metaphorical, but he sure was. His head was on fire later.
Maybe he's shedding his vanity so that he can be closer to the divine. Like hair represents something vain, like the Buddhists. They shave their heads. Maybe it's something. Like that.
I thought the fire was meant to be in reference to the Boethian prayer that the fire is mine.
Yeah, I mean it's faith. It's like the whole connection to the divine.
Was that a Boethian prayer? I did not know that. Okay.
Well, Boethia is the only deity that's mentioned in it, so I figured it would be.
It's a prayer to Boethia. It's a very old prayer.
Yeah.
Oh, I apparently wrote a whole freaking thing about it on the Elder Scrolls on TES lore. Apparently, did I? Hold on.
I was going to mention there was something done some time ago regarding that. I didn't know.
Internet is not terribly fast right now. Dead air. Somebody say something for. Here it is. Oh God, it's a huge article. It's really long. Okay, I'll just try to remember to link this in the comments below because there's a lot. Apparently, I wrote it and then forgot all about it. Is apparently what happened. Oh, that's right. Yes, it has to do with the Hindu and yoga concept of perfect knowledge and divine power through just self-education, of becoming aware of the true nature of the universe and the power that you gain from that knowledge. It's a little bit like Chim, but not quite. It's less of a state of being and more of a collection of just knowledge, of just skill.
No, I gotta say something in relation to that. The NPCs in Morrowind, like you read the metaphysical stuff like 2920, but the priests and the people that talk about the gods say that they achieve their divinity through supernatural effort and study. So that kind of ties in.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it has to do with Vivec's nature as being mastery of the three, as being. I mean, that's what the divine fire is. It's mastery. It's Also, I mean, everybody knows the whole thing about man stealing the secret of fire from the gods, right? Prometheus. Is that not exactly what they did with the Heart of Lorcan?
Yes.
Pretty much.
I wanted to get into that a little bit, too, before we're done here.
And instead of being pecked by birds, they got weird eyes or whatever.
But good pointing out. They were punished. Right? Yeah. Well, yeah. Punished by Clifford. No, they were punished. A physical aberration happened to them. They were punished physically. Their eyes weren't pecked out, but their eyes were turned red. Their skin was turned, dark. And that's the consequence for stealing fire from the gods, except instead of it just happening to the tribunal, it happened to all the Dunmer. Or it didn't. Or maybe it was Vivec's brooding that brought on their change. Who knows?
Or, well, it really depends on who you ask. Maybe it was because someone broke a promise to Azura.
Right.
Well, there's a theory there, too, that was not the end of Azura's punishment. Rather, the theory I like is that was only the beginning. That was the smokescreen.
That was Azura. I know Michael Burns tried to fire, so
really, the coming of the Nerevarine and the downfall of the Tribunal and the Red Ear and all that was really Azura's final.
Revenge is a dish best served cold.
Yep. And that's Azura's relationship to the Tribunal is interesting, considering the fact that Sotha Hill's she's supposed to be the anticipation of Sotha Hill.
Yeah, not to get off on Sotha Hill, but did it seem to you like Azura almost was like a little bit sorry that he died, like even though he's the one that like stood up to her, like you seem to not hate him as much as the other two.
Yeah.
Maybe she just wished that she was the one who did it.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, it's also possible that Sotha Hill, being the sort of like a shut-in that he was, didn't really spend a whole lot of time exploring the duality between him and Azura, whereas Almalexia and Boethia clearly had were clearly buddy in some way because of what a boss Almalexia was, and
it straight up says in the 36 lessons. It straight up says that in the 36 lessons. I think it's Almalexia, whose shadow was that of Boethia. I mean, shit. What more do you need?
She wears his face as a war mask. Like.
Yeah. Well, all Enderil guards. Hey, that's something we should talk about. So, of course, at the towards the end of 36 lessons, it's referenced, but everybody who paid attention during Morrowind knows that Nerevar was eventually killed by the Tribunal, for one reason or another. Well, okay.
Spoilers.
Yeah, tough. Suck it up. The game's 10 years old. Get past it. And so, and without telling exactly how this happens, basically you're told pretty much outright that Vivec murdered Nerevar, and the three of them used the Heart of Lorcan to become gods. So, considering the fact that Almalexia was Nerevar's wife, and we can sort of imply that Vivec had some sort of a physical relationship with Nerevar as well. What do you think was running through their heads when they decided to stab his ass in the back?
I've always wanted to hear that discussed, mainly because for it to have happened, every member of the tribunal had to be in on it. That means not just Vivec, who we see a lot of and we hear a lot of, but that means Almalexia had to do it as well, and Sotha Hill had to have a reason for it as well.
Yeah.
I think they all had a reason.
Yeah.
I've always wondered, I mean, like, you can see Vivec's point of view, you can see Almalexia's. I've always wondered, what would have gotten Sotha Hill on board with that.
Yeah.
Because he seems like kind of a passive guy.
Yeah, I've kind of felt that he, being, the Psijic and everything, he of all people knew what messing with the Heart of Lorcan would do, and he's the one who converted the tools anyway. I feel like he was at a moment where he thought either my best friend stays alive, or I can help out an entire country better than it's ever been. So
I think,
what do I do here?
Yeah, because you can even look at Sotha Hill's letters, to Vivec, or however the fuck you pronounce his name. It's basically I really fucking hope you don't have all this shit, because you don't need to be messing with that. So is that coming from personal experience, or did he always know that? Because I mean, he's a smart enough guy. You'd think that he would have gone into it, knowing something about it, but
yeah, it's surely he was. Yeah, that's. It just doesn't seem realistic that Sotha Hill would have shown up oh, we're killing Nerevar today? Oh,
cool.
Crap. Okay.
I got my killing dagger.
I would have brought some plastic bags, but I got I guess this is what we're doing today. This is how my day's going to go.
Plastic bags.
I think just gonna fight the Dwemer and the Nords and the Orcs and everything like that. It'll be fine. Another day.
I think to come to an answer for that, let's consider everything we've discussed about Vivec so far, being the intermediary between the two, being a just charismatic as fuck person. I believe his strongest. We've said it here. His greatest power was his words, beginning to end. His ability to influence people with his words. And if you look at the state of the Chimera at the time, you're looking at a war-torn nation pushed to the brink of a genocidal war with two enemies, one within their own borders and one right next door. I think it's entirely feasible that Vivec convinced the other Tribunes that, we have a shot here to really give our people. I'm a big fan of the heroic Vic idea. I don't think he's a good person, but I do think he did most of the things he did with the best interest of his people at heart.
I think that really on every single level of Vivec, we can look at it from a duality point of view, because every single thing that Vivec does, we can break it down, into two separate parts.
Right you are, best friend Tabitha.
Okay, well, I had a point, but you made me forget.
Well, it's certainly worth mentioning that the state that they were in at the time of being at war with the Dwemer and the Nords meant that they needed every advantage they could get. And if I recall correctly, and I think I do, Nerevar's decision to not use the Heart of Lorcan was based entirely upon advice from Boran Dagoth.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
That's true.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So and depending on what version of the story you're reading, he may or may not have gone back to consult the tribunal, or they may have been there already, or it's not entirely obvious what. But it's possible they could have made a very solid argument when they showed up, and Boran Dagoth was insane. They could have said, well, look, it's clear that his advice was no good, and we need to use the heart. And I'm pretty confident that Nerevar probably would have just said, no, we're going to honor him and do what he says. And then you get into a real, actual, honest-to-God argument instead of what I also think was going on, which was Vivec was sitting in the background with his hands like, that's excellent. We'll use the Heart of Lorcan to become gods.
And at least one version of the history, that's what happened.
Oh, of course. But you remember your point, Tabitha?
Oh, yeah, okay. Whoever the fuck was talking before me said about Vivec being good versus bad. I think a lot of times people really get caught up on that in community discussions. Like, they'll get in arguments like, is Vivec a force for good? Is Vivec a force for bad? You really can't simplify it into just one thing like that because of Vivec's whole dual nature. Vivec does good, Vivec does bad.
Well, the only thing Vivec's ever going to probably admit to would be that he's either a force for change or he's a force for good of the Dunmer.
Right. That's what he would admit to.
Whether they know it or not is debatable.
This goes back to, we get this in history too, and it goes back to when we were discussing the different the religions a few podcasts ago, and how it's something that makes Tess more like our real world than some other fantasy universes may be. You look at any leader in world history, any one of them, and you never get a completely good person, a completely evil person. We have, let's take Caligula, for example. We have, the guy was in power in Rome for 4 years, and nobody remembers the public works projects or the anything good the guy did. You remember him for making his horse a senator and sending the Senate's wives to a whorehouse and being just absolutely batshit insane.
Well, let's stop talking about this and talk more about Vivec's dick for a little while. Wait, no, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
And so I think it's important to keep that in mind. I mean, we don't have any figure in history, and most figures in TES, I'd wager, could be looked at through that dual lens of they do like Doctor Who says. You got a pile of good things and a pile of bad things, and the bad things don't necessarily cancel good things out.
Or vice versa, yeah.
Yeah.
In all honesty, I feel like talking about whether Vivec or really any character, except in the case of, let's say, Dagother or Dagon, it's dumb to say, is this character good or bad? Like, come on, man.
I don't think that we can really...
We can't even say they're bad.
Like, we can't even get into that with Dagother, though. Like, we can't even get into whether Dagother is wholly good or wholly bad, because you gotta admit that Dagother is a really fucking sympathetic character.
No,
that's the point, though, that he isn't clearly good or bad, and he's not meant to be good or bad. And I don't think any of the characters, aside from maybe Dagon in Oblivion, because, let's face it, that main quest, not that well written. The characters aren't meant to be... the characters...
Come after you.
I just don't think the characters should be just good or bad. They should be their own thing. And their actions should be good or bad, but not just one or the other.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I would agree that applies for, most, if not every character in the Elder Scrolls, but I think in the case of Vivec, it just exacerbates it, the whole thing.
Actually, I think we should probably spend at least one episode just for, self-indulgence and just talk about Dagother for, an hour.
I would love to.
I got one analogy to make about Vivec as a character and whether he's good or bad. The book, Vivec, talks about the secret, but most people about it because it was so far in the, who can really say? That kind of reminds me of the mentality people have about Mussolini. Like, say what you will about that Mussolini, but the trains arrive on time.
But they didn't.
He made the trains run on time.
Yeah, it's well, okay. So, as I like to say almost every time when we get towards the end of one of these things, Elder Scrolls lore, it's complicated. I'm trying to think of what else.
Oh,
do your homework.
Kind of wanted.
Is there anything else that we've?
I kind of wanted to, just going back to the Battle of Red Mountain, where Nerevar is eventually killed. I kind of feel like the tribunal's standpoint and Dagother's, or Vorin Dagoth's standpoint was choosing between whether you do something right by your mate or you do something right for many more
like
people.
Another.
Yes, please.
Can you guys not hear me?
No, we can.
Okay, yeah. I heard a lot of background chatter, and I thought you didn't hear me say anything. I just felt like Dagother was...
He keeps falling down.
Yeah, he's like, the Heart of Lorkhan, we can't mess with this. Who knows what it can do, buddy, stay away. And whereas the tribunal were like, hey, no, come on, do it, come on.
Yeah, come on.
But they had, like, it was that the tribunal wanted to do good by a lot of people in Morrowind, whereas Dagother wanted to do good by his best friend, Nerevar.
That's true. And he was really, like, you can read the dialogue, that Dagother's dialogue in Morrowind is very upset
Do you mind if I bring one over there?
Nerevarine shows up. Like, what the hell, like, dude, what do you, put your damn sword down. What do you think you're doing here, I mean...
And he says, like, I think it's a line about sneaking or something like that. And it's like, is this how you come to me? Like, your best friend? Like, this is how you're treating me? You can't just walk to me like another person? Come on, man.
I thought we were bros, dude.
Yeah.
It's interesting because like one of the things about Dagother is that he may have been Nerevar's closest friend out of all these people because and he was clearly one of his most trusted individuals. Yeah.
He's the only one who didn't betray him.
In a way, well, him and Landra Sewell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I find interesting is, like, there's very little mention in the 36 lessons of, Warren Dagoth by name. Like, it's just, the Sharmat all the way through. Like, we don't actually hear about what he actually might have been.
I kind of feel like
Vivec doesn't care, probably.
Well, yeah, he doesn't, but
Vivec's got an impetus to whitewash his past, too.
Yeah.
He can't paint his enemy as a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
I seem to remember the Sharmat being pretty, like, a different person or something. Like, what was it called again? The Sharmat isn't Dagothr, or Dagothr is the Sharmat, but the Sharmat is other people as well.
I always took him as a manifestation of a Newick force.
Yeah.
Yeah, he seems to be some sort of manifestation, or like
he's
definitely
he's the ancient old married
like a role rather than a person.
Vela led them away from. He's the devil, like almost an Oriel type figure.
Don't they actually call him the Devil Sharmat or the Devil Dagothr at some point?
Yeah, they call him the Devil Dagothr like lots.
But that's in the Nordic text, the 5 Songs of King Wolfar. That's not in the 36 Lessons or I think any Dunmerry text.
It's all in the dialogue though in the game.
Like
the Devil Dagothr and the Devil.
Yeah, you definitely get that.
Especially Ashlanders.
I think I heard that. Yeah. Coda, you wanted to talk about Coda?
Yeah. Well, we have. I don't know how much we want to give away about Coda for those who have not read it yet, but you've had ample time.
It's been out since February, guys.
we have in Coda, we see in the sermons at the beginning, and we see, I guess, in the games, I guess you could say, through in at least Morrowind through Oblivion, through Skyrim, we see the middle, and in Coda we see the end. We see a post-apocalyptic world laid low by the Numidium and whatnot. And I think we could discuss, and I mean we could probably spend an hour discussing Lorcanic forces working through Tamriel, and the nature of Vivec as being a very Lorcanic figure. And what we have is when we get to the enantiomorphic event, which created the god Talos, we had a meeting where when Tiber was going through and conquering everything, he wanted Morrowind. He goes into Morrowind and has a little sit-down meeting with Vivec, and we don't know what is discussed there. All we know is that Tiber walks out of it with Morrowind being integrated into the Empire under very, very special conditions given to them, and that
he does.
And that Tiber walks away with the Numidium in hand. And this is where we get into another one of my crazy crackpot theories I like to create and promote. But the idea that Vivec saw Talos, or saw Tiber for what he was.
Both Vivec and Nerevar had seen Talos or Tiber one way or the other in a dream long before he was born.
Yeah, in the 36 Lessons, they see him as the Red Diamond of Conquest.
So how would how do you think someone like Ulfric would react finding out that Talos was a creation of an elf?
As in Vivec gave him Numidium, knowing full well that in the future Numidium would come back and create landfall.
I think it's totally Vecian, if you will, that he knew from the moment Tiber came to him what Tiber was and what Tiber was capable of. And you look at the 36 sermons, all that is a manual to godhood. It's a manual on the walking ways. And I think when they had their little meet and greet, Vivec sat down with Tiber and told him, look, here's what is. You're going to leave here with the most powerful tool. And I think it was a premeditated and intentional action on Vivec's part to create Talos.
Well, let me back up your argument. The love letter from the Fifth Era quotes directly from the 36 Lessons and says these are the clues to love and how to avoid landfall. As in, Vivec, in the 36 lessons, was writing a manual on how to survive landfall. So he knew landfall was coming. He knew what landfall was going to entail, and therefore, I agree completely. He gave Numidium to Tiber Septim, knowing full well that it was going to come back and cause landfall in the Fifth Era.
Yeah, as in through godhood that is described and talked about in the 36 lessons, can you survive landfall? Which, you know, I guess Tiber does himself because he's walked every fucking way.
Well,
and Vivec as well. And both, when we see both of them in there.
It's true. And yeah,
all of that was necessary steps to the eventual creation of the magical space baby.
Exactly.
That's one way to put it.
Which is Amaranth, which is, without a question, something Vivec knew about before landfall happened, and something that he clearly desired.
Which would make him possibly the savior of
Tamriel in general.
Tamriel itself. I mean, it really puts him
the architect of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he knew there were things happening.
Sorry. What'd you say?
Oh, I was saying I wouldn't necessarily say that just because in Landfall, you don't really have a savior of Tamriel because all you really have is a savior of the people who lived on there and then fucked off to the moons. I mean, Tamriel is gone.
But the Dunmer survived, and I think probably what you could say is that Vivec's plan wasn't a plan to save everyone in Tamriel; it was just a plan to save his people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's interesting, especially when you consider it with the fall of, the Ministry of Truth and everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Vivec spent a lot of time beating the shit out of his own people.
Yeah.
In terrible ways. In the Trial of Agathon Hall, he blew one up just for shits and giggles. What I can do.
I love that so much.
And it's sort of like, has everybody here read the Dune series, or at least Frank Herbert's Dune series?
I haven't.
I like to draw a lot of parallels between Vivec and Leto II, and Vivec's Golden Path is what I like to call it, of the idea that Vivec saw landfall coming and has been preparing his people to survive it by beating the crap out of them all the time, by creating by abusing them so that they are cut into better shapes and become something and eventually become a society and a culture that can create what eventually, God, Jesus. Oh man! It creates they create the one person who can inseminate Vivec.
Mm-hmm.
You know what's cool about that too? I'm glad you brought up Dune and Leto II. Because it kind of goes back to what Cody was saying. That I think it was you, Cody, that was saying that Tiber gave Numidium as a catalyst for landfall. Not only did he know he was happening, he knew he'd have an active part, which is kind of similar to Leto II with the Golden Path, with the scattering. He is what the people think is him totally fucking them over and ruining all infrastructure that they had as an empire. But in reality, he saved humanity as a whole. And and that is a really good parallel. I think we can kind of draw into Vivec.
Well, MK said something the other day when we were talking about Vivec and one of the threads in I don't know which group anymore. But he said, somebody was talking about, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier. He said, "Oh, Vivec is absolutely evil," but that doesn't mean that an evil person can't have heroic traits or be a hero.
Mm-hmm. Oh, was it that thread about the RPG alignment thing?
D&D alignment.
I think
probably.
Those kind of annoy me in general.
Yeah. Well, okay, let's not get off on a rant, but because we will about RPG alignment charts. But right. All right, no. All right, okay. Because we've hit well over an hour here, so let's let's bring it to a close. I'm not saying that we're not going to bring this topic up again. Because it kind of feels like we still got plenty to talk about.
Oh yeah.
So, in the meantime, I don't know what the hell's going on with this podcast, dude. It hasn't been, 2 weeks since we did the last one? I mean, what the hell? Time is a flat circle. Shut up, Prince.
Love Vivec a lot.
We've done this before. What is that, Nietzsche? Shut the fuck up. We're oh god, this is so weird for people who haven't seen that. We've been the Selectives Lorecast, and we'll see you when we see you. Bye.
Bye.
Enjoy.